His hand slowly descended to her face, and Marina felt the world unraveling between her fingers. The gilded hall was filled with hungry eyes, but there, in that moment suspended in time, only the two of them existed. She, trembling like a leaf in the wind. He still as an ancient stone. A whisper escaped his lips, so low that only her heart could hear it. The door of destiny was opening. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. Marina awoke to the sound of hooves on wet stone. The pre-dawn rain had left the convent courtyard slick, and the sisters were already bustling about, preparing things for the visit. An important visit, judging by the Mother Superior's nervous pacing, adjusting her veil every 5 minutes. She rose slowly from the thin mat that served as her bed. 17 years living there, ever since they found her abandoned at the gate, and she had never seen such a commotion. The other orphans were already awake too, whispering softly in their corners. Marina pulled the grey dress over her head, the same one as always, patched at the hem, too loose on her slender frame. Sister Catherine appeared at the dormitory door, breathless as if she had run up the stairs. "Marina! The mother wants you in the kitchen, now." Her heart gave a strange leap. Marina was never called for anything important. She always stayed in the corners, quiet, helping with the embroideries the sisters sold at the market. She had skillful hands for sewing, but nothing else that drew attention. She descended the cold stone stairs, her stomach tightening. In the kitchen, the Mother Superior paced back and forth, her hands trembling as she arranged the dishes. "Ah, Marina, you've arrived just in time." The woman stopped, looking at her with that expression Marina knew well. It was the way people looked when they needed something, but didn't want to admit they needed it. "Today we have a very special visitor. The Lord of Blackwood Valley is coming to inspect the church's properties. I need you to serve lunch." Marina felt her blood run cold. Serve? She, who barely knew how to hold a tray properly? "But Mother, I've never—" "You'll learn quickly." The superior's voice was harsher than usual. "The others are sick with the fever, and you're the only one left." A lie. Marina knew it was a lie. The other orphans were all well. She had seen them whispering in the dormitory, but arguing with the mother led nowhere. The sound of hooves returned closer now. Marina peeked through the small kitchen window and saw the knights entering the courtyard. 6 men, all in black, their armor gleaming even under the cloudy sky. In front came a horse larger than the others, black as coal, and atop it. Marina swallowed hard. The man was immense, occupying all the space around him without even trying. Dark hair tied back behind his head, a thin scar running from his temple to his beard. When he dismounted, the other knights instinctively recoiled a step. "That's him," the mother whispered, appearing beside her at the window. "Lord Alexander of Blackwood Valley." Blackwood Valley. Marina had heard of that place. They said that whoever entered there didn't return the same, that the lord of those lands had strange ways, and that the women of the region lowered their eyes when his name was mentioned. "Marina, go get ready. Put on the brown dress, the least worn one, and tie your hair properly." She ran up to the dormitory, her legs like jelly. The brown dress was at the bottom of the donated clothes trunk. It was too small, tight across the chest and hips, but it was the best they had. She tied her brown hair in a simple braid, her hands trembling. When she descended, the silence in the convent was heavy as lead. The sisters had disappeared down the corridors, and only the mother waited at the refectory. Entrance, her hands clasped in front of her body. "Remember," she whispered as Marina approached, "stay quiet, serve the food, don't look him in the eye, and for God's sake don't do anything to draw attention." Marina nodded, her throat too dry to speak. The refectory door opened, and there he was. Lord Alexander occupied the main chair as if it were a throne. He had removed his helmet but kept his armor, and the candlelight reflected off the metal, creating shadows that danced on the walls. The other knights sat further back in silence. Marina approached the table with the soup tureen in her hands, concentrating so as not to spill anything. She served the knights' plates first, as the mother had taught her, feeling their eyes fixed on her back. When she reached the lord, her hands trembled. "Excuse me, my lord." She bent to serve, and that's when it happened. The wide sleeve of her dress caught on the edge of the plate, and everything collapsed. The hot soup spilled across the table, staining the papers he was reading, dripping onto his dark armor. The refectory turned to ice. Marina stood paralyzed, the empty tureen in her hands, seeing the mess she had made. The knights rose from their chairs, their hands instinctively going to their swords. The Mother Superior let out a soft gasp from the corner, but Lord Alexander did not move. He slowly raised his gaze, and that's when Marina made her second mistake. She looked directly into his eyes. They were dark as night, but with a strange glow deep within them, like embers not yet extinguished. "Your name," he said, his grave voice echoing in the silence. Marina, my lord." Her voice was barely a thread. He stood up, and Marina realized how tall he was. She had to tilt her head back to keep looking at him. A drop of soup ran down his armor, leaving a shiny trail on the metal. "Marina." He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting it. "How old are you?" 17, my lord." He took a step forward. Marina wanted to retreat, but her legs wouldn't obey. 17 years old. He extended his hand, and with his fingertips touched her chin, making her lift her face. "And never served at a table before." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Marina felt her face burn. He knew. He had noticed immediately that she had no experience, that the mother had lied about the other orphans being sick. "No, my lord." The truth came out on its own. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered something interesting. Interesting. He released her chin and turned to the Mother Superior. "Why is this girl here, Mother?" The woman stammered, trying to explain, but he raised his hand, cutting off her words. "It doesn't matter." He looked back at Marina. "Clean the table." She rushed to get the cloths, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped more things. As she wiped the soup, she felt his eyes burning into her back. The knight sat down again, but the atmosphere remained tense. When she finished, he motioned for her to approach. "Marina, from the convent." She nodded, not knowing what to say. "You will come with me." The world stopped. The mother let out a muffled scream. The knights exchanged glances. Marina felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. "My lord," she managed to whisper. "Tomorrow morning. Bring what you have. It won't be much, I imagine." He stood up, tossing a golden coin onto the table. "For the hospitality, Mother, and for the inconvenience." He left the refectory, followed by the knights, leaving a deadly silence behind. Marina stood there, holding the soup-stained cloth, trying to understand what had just happened. The mother approached, her face livid. "What have you done, child? What have you done?" But Marina couldn't answer. She only knew that the world she knew had just collapsed like a house of cards, and that tomorrow she would be going to a place from which she might never return. Outside, she heard the sound of hooves receding on the wet stone, and for the first time in her life, Marina felt true fear. Marina couldn't sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the wooden ceiling, listening to the other orphans whispering in the dark. Some were envious, others felt pity. None truly understood what was happening. She didn't understand either. The hours passed slowly, like cold molasses. When the bell rang for matins, Marina had long been awake, arranging her few belongings in a cloth bag. 3 patched dresses, a pair of worn shoes, the rosary she had received from Sister Catherine when she turned 15, and a piece of lace she was embroidering, the only beautiful work she had ever done. The mother appeared at the dormitory door before sunrise, her face aged 10 years in one night. "Marina, it's time." They descended the stone stairs together, the silence heavy between them. In the courtyard, the knights were already waiting. Lord Alexander was mounted on his black horse, his armor gleaming in the faint morning light. When he saw Marina, he nodded. "Come." One of the knights dismounted and approached. He was younger than the others, with a face that suggested he didn't much like what he was doing. "Will she ride pillion on my horse, my lord?" No. The Lord's voice cut through the air like a whip. She will ride the chestnut horse, alone. Marina felt her stomach churn. She barely knew how to walk properly, let alone ride. The knight brought a smaller, calmer horse, but still enormous for someone who had never been on such an animal. I don't know how to ride, my lord, she whispered. Lord Alexander dismounted from the black horse in a fluid motion, as if made of water. He approached Marina, took her waist with both hands, and lifted her effortlessly onto the saddle. His hands were large, strong, and Marina felt their warmth through the thin fabric of her dress. "Hold the reins like this," he murmured, placing her hands in the correct position. "The horse knows the way. Just don't let go." His fingers brushed her wrists as he adjusted the reins. Marina felt a strange shiver run up her arms. He returned to his black horse and the retinue set off. Marina held on, as best she could, her body swaying awkwardly with the horse's rhythm. Behind her, the convent dwindled until it became a speck on the horizon. The first day of travel was a nightmare. Marina's back ached, her legs trembled, and with every bump in the road, she thought she would fall and break her neck. The knight stopped to rest every hour, but even so, it was torture. At lunchtime, they stopped in a clearing beside a stream. Marina dismounted with wobbly legs, almost falling flat on her face. One of the knights chuckled softly but stopped when Lord Alexander looked in his direction. "Eat," he said, offering a piece of bread and dried meat. Marina accepted, ravenous. She hadn't eaten breakfast, she was so nervous. She ate in silence, sitting on a stone, trying to ignore the knight's glances. Some seemed curious, others suspicious. One in particular, a bald man with a scar on his neck, looked at her with an unfriendly expression. "Why her?" he asked softly to another knight, but loud enough for Marina to hear. "Careful, Matthew," the other replied. "You know the Lord, he always has his reasons." Marina pretended not to be listening, but the words swirled in her head. Why her? What did a powerful lord want with a nameless orphan, without family, with nothing to offer? When they resumed riding, Lord Alexander struck up a conversation for the first time. "How long have you lived in the convent?" "Since forever, my lord. They found me at the gate when I was a baby." "You don't remember your parents?" "No, my lord." He remained silent for a while, riding beside her. The black horse moved with elegance, each step calculated as if it were dancing. "Can you read?" Marina nodded. The sisters had taught all the orphans their letters, even though it was against custom. "Write?" "A little, my lord." "And sew?" "Yes." That was the only thing she knew how to do well. "I embroider too." He nodded, as if storing the information in his memory. Marina wanted to ask why he wanted to know these things, but she didn't have the courage. The sun was setting when they finally stopped for the night. It was a small inn, in the middle of nowhere, with an owner who treated Lord Alexander as if he were the king himself. Marina was given a small room upstairs with a real bed, the first in her life. At dinner time she went down to the main hall. The knights were sitting at a large table, drinking ale and talking in low voices. Lord Alexander was alone at a smaller table, reading a parchment by candlelight. Marina stood on the stairs, unsure whether to approach or return to her room. That's when he looked up and motioned for her to sit. "Eat something. Tomorrow's journey is longer." She sat in the chair opposite him, her hands trembling slightly. The food was good. A beef stew with vegetables, fresh bread, sweet wine. Much better than the convent food. "Where are we going, my lord?" she asked, gathering courage. "To my home." "To Blackwood Valley." He smiled, and Marina realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It changed his whole face, made him look younger. "Are you afraid?" Marina thought about the answer. She wanted to lie, to say no, but something in his eyes made her tell the truth. "I am, my lord." "You're intelligent." He returned to reading the parchment. "Fear keeps people alive." They ate in silence after that. Marina watched him covertly, trying to understand how a man could be so intimidating, and at the same time so She didn't know how to explain it. There was a hidden sadness in him, as if he carried a weight no one else could see. When he finished eating, he stood up. "Go rest. We leave early." Marina went up to her small room, more confused than ever. She lay on the soft bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and tried to understand what she was doing there. A day ago, she was in the convent, living the same routine as always. Now she was going to an unknown place with a man she didn't understand. Perhaps the mother was right. Perhaps she had done something terrible without realizing it. But if she had, why didn't Lord Alexander seem angry? Why did he treat her with this strange courtesy, as if she were important? Sleep was slow to come, and when it finally did, it brought strange dreams. Black horses running across an endless plain, dark stone castles, and eyes that glowed like burning coals. The next day she awoke to the sound of horses being prepared. The sun had barely risen, but everyone was already up. Marina put on the same dress from the day before, she had no other clean one, and went down to the courtyard. "Today you'll fare better," Lord Alexander said, helping her onto the horse. "The body gets used to it." He was right. The aches were still there, but they were bearable. Marina managed to stay firm in the saddle with less effort. The path changed during the morning. The trees became denser, the air colder, and a fine mist began to form among the branches. The knights became more alert, their hands always near their swords. "We've entered the lands of Blackwood Valley," Lord Alexander said when they stopped for lunch. Marina looked around. Everything seemed the same to her, but there was something different in the air. A strange stillness, as if even the birds preferred to remain silent. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "So quiet." He looked at her with renewed interest. "You feel it, don't you?" "Feel what?" "The difference. Few people notice it right away." He chewed a piece of meat, thoughtfully. "Perhaps you are not as ordinary as you seem." Marina didn't know if that was good or bad. She was beginning to suspect that with Lord Alexander, nothing was as simple as it seemed. When the castle appeared on the horizon, Marina understood why they called it Blackwood Valley. The structure was gigantic, made of dark stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It stood on an elevation in the center of a valley surrounded by mountains, as if it were the heart of a separate world. And for the first time since leaving the convent, Marina was absolutely certain that the life she knew had ended forever. The castle was even more imposing up close. The walls rose into the sky like stone mountains, and the gates were so tall that Marina had to tilt her head all the way back to see the top. When the knights shouted something she didn't understand, the heavy wooden doors opened with a deep groan that echoed through the entire valley. Marina gripped the reins tighter. Her heart pounded in her chest. They entered a first walled area, an enormous courtyard full of stables, blacksmiths, and smaller buildings where people worked. Men and women stopped what they were doing to watch the retinue pass. Some waved respectfully to Lord Alexander, but Marina noticed that most eyes were on her. It was the curiosity of someone seeing something out of place. They passed through another, smaller gate and entered the main courtyard. There was the heart of the castle, an immense tower that rose into the sky like a stone needle, surrounded by smaller buildings clinging to its walls like climbing plants. A woman approached as soon as they dismounted. She was thin, middle-aged, with grey hair tied in a tight bun and a dark dress that reached her feet. She had that serious manner of people who command without needing to shout. "Welcome back, my lord," she said, making a quick curtsy. "Beatrice." Lord Alexander gestured to Marina. "This is Marina. Arrange a room for her, and suitable clothes." The woman, Beatrice, looked Marina up and down, and her face showed everything. It was pure disapproval. "Yes, my lord." Her voice was as cold as ice. Lord Alexander turned to Marina, who was still on the horse, not knowing how to dismount without embarrassment. "Beatrice is the housekeeper. She will look after you for now." He raised his arms and helped her down, his hands firm on her waist. For a moment they were too close, and Marina smelled him. Leather, metal, and something reminiscent of pine. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't immediately let go. "Don't be afraid," he said softly, just for her to hear. "You are under my protection." Marina nodded, her throat too dry to speak. He released her waist and stepped away, ascending the main entrance stairs with long strides. The knights followed him, leaving Marina alone with Beatrice. The housekeeper waited until the lord disappeared to show what she truly thought. "Come," she said dryly, "and try not to touch anything expensive." Marina followed her up the stairs, carrying the small bag with her belongings. Inside, the castle was even more impressive than outside. The walls were covered with embroidered tapestries. There were iron chandeliers with thick candles, and the floor was of smooth stone that reflected light like a mirror. "How old are you?" Beatrice asked as they ascended a spiral staircase. 17. That was her only comment. They reached a long corridor with several dark wooden doors. Beatrice opened one in the middle of the corridor and gestured for Marina to enter. The room was small but larger than anything Marina had ever seen. There was a bed with curtains, a wooden table with a basin for washing her face, and even a small window overlooking the courtyard. In the corner, a wooden trunk. "Your clothes are in there," Beatrice pointed to the trunk. "Put on something decent and come down to the main hall. Someone will explain your duties." "My duties?" The housekeeper laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. "What do you think you're here for? A holiday? Everyone works in this castle, even the special guests." The word guests came out laden with bitterness, as if it tasted bad. Marina was left alone in the small room, trying to process everything. She opened the trunk and found 3 dresses, a dark blue, a brown, and a moss green. They were simple, but the fabric was infinitely better than anything she had ever worn. She chose the blue and changed, admiring how the dress fit her body properly. There were also soft leather shoes, the first ones that didn't hurt her feet. When she went down to the main hall, she didn't know what to expect. What she found left her breathless. It was an enormous space, with a soaring ceiling supported by thick pillars like tree trunks. In the center was a long table that could seat 20 people, and on the walls portraits of serious men in old clothes. But what really caught her attention were the women. There were 3 of them sitting by the fireplace, embroidering in silence. When Marina appeared, they all looked up. It was obvious they were noble. Their dresses were of colored silk, their hair arranged in complicated updos, their jewels sparkled even in the faint afternoon light. The eldest, a blonde woman of about 30, stood up and approached. "So you're the new arrival?" Her voice was sweet, but there was a coolness underneath, like crystallized honey. "I am Lady Helen, this is Lady Isabella," she pointed to a younger brunette, "and that is Lady Clara." Marina made an awkward curtsy. "Marina, my lady." "Marina, what? What is your family name?" The silence stretched. Marina felt her face flush. I have no family, my lady. I'm an orphan." The 3 women exchanged glances, the kind of glance that says a lot without needing words. "Ah!" Lady Helen returned to her chair, the smile still on her face. "How interesting." Lady Isabella leaned forward, feigning interest. "And how did you meet the Lord? You must have a fascinating story." Marina told them about the convent, about the accident with the soup, trying to make the story less embarrassing than it had been. But she could tell by the women's eyes that every word only worsened her situation. "How romantic," said Lady Clara, the youngest. "He rescued you from the convent like a knight from a storybook." The others chuckled softly. It wasn't malicious laughter on the surface, but Marina felt the hidden venom beneath. "And what do you do?" asked Lady Helen. "What is your special talent?" "I embroider, and sew in general." "How useful." The tone was too sweet to be sincere. "I'm sure you'll do very well here." Before Marina could respond, Beatrice appeared at the entrance to the hall. "Marina, come with me. I'll show you where you'll be working." Marina followed the housekeeper, relieved to escape the 3 women. They left the hall and went down to the ground floor, passing through corridors full of doors and stairs that led nowhere. The castle was a labyrinth. "These women," Marina began. "Court ladies," Beatrice cut her off. "All from important families. Lady Helen is the widow of a count. The other 2 are daughters of landowners who have dealings with the Lord." "Do they live here?" "They visit frequently." The housekeeper stopped at a door at the end of the corridor. "And they think they have special privileges because of it." She opened the door and revealed a room full of looms, cutting tables and shelves with fabrics and threads. The smell of wool and cotton permeated the air. "You'll work here, help the seamstresses with whatever is needed." Beatrice looked her directly in the eyes. "And one thing, girl, keep your distance from the court ladies. They seem sweet, but they are poisonous as snakes. And you are exactly the kind of threat they like to eliminate." "Threat? Me?" Beatrice sighed, as if talking to a very young child. "You don't understand anything, do you?" She shook her head. "The Lord brought you here for some reason, and these women spend their whole lives trying to get his attention. Now an orphan appears out of nowhere and achieves what they cannot. How do you think they'll react?" Marina felt a chill in her stomach. She hadn't thought of that. She thought the problem would be adapting to the work, learning the castle rules. She never imagined she would be seen as rivalry. "But I don't want any attention from him," she said. "I just want to work in peace and not bother anyone." "What you want doesn't matter much here, girl." The housekeeper turned her back to leave. "What matters is what people think you want, and what the Lord wants with you." She was left alone in the sewing room, surrounded by colourful fabrics and shiny threads, trying to understand how her life had become so complicated. 2 days ago, her only concern was not spilling food on the table. Now she was in the middle of a web of intrigues she barely understood. She picked up a piece of linen and began to embroider, trying to calm her nerves. Her hands knew what to do, even when her head was confused. Stitch by stitch, she created a delicate design, small flowers intertwined, with leaves. That's when she heard footsteps in the corridor. The door opened and Lord Alexander appeared. He had removed his armor and was wearing simple clothes, leather breeches and a white shirt that revealed a bit of his chest. His dark hair was loose, falling over his shoulders. Marina almost dropped her embroidery. "Are you adapting?" he asked, approaching the table where she was working. "Yes, my lord." Her voice was sharper than usual. He picked up the piece of cloth she was embroidering, examining the work carefully. Beautiful, delicate. His fingers brushed hers when he returned the embroidery. Marina felt the same thing as before, that strange shiver that ran up her arms. "Marina," he said, his voice lower, "I need you to understand one thing. This castle, it's not a simple place. People here have interests, ambitions, games you don't know." She nodded, trying to pay attention to his words instead of being mesmerized by the way he spoke. "If anyone bothers you, come to me, understand?" "Understood, my lord." He stood there for a while longer, just looking at her. Marina felt as if he was trying to decipher something, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Good night, Marina." "Good night, my lord." When he left, Marina realized she had been holding her breath for a long time. She slowly exhaled, trying to understand what was happening to her. Outside, dusk was falling, and Marina had a feeling that the real challenges hadn't even begun yet. The first days in the castle passed slowly, like water dripping from a stone. Marina learned the routines, met the other workers, tried to remain invisible. The sewing room became her refuge, a place where her hands had something to do and her mind could rest from the curious glances and whispers that followed her through the corridors. But remaining invisible was harder than she imagined. On the third morning, she was finishing an embroidery for one of the cook's dresses when Lady Helen appeared at the room's door, followed by the other 2 ladies. "Marina, dear," her voice was sweet as rock candy, "we need your help with something." Marina looked up from her embroidery, already sensing danger in the air. "Of course, my lady. What can I do?" Lady Helen approached, her high heels clicking on the stone floor. "You see, we have an important event tomorrow night. People from other domains will be coming to dine with the Lord." She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "And my dress, well, it needs some last-minute adjustments." She gestured to Lady Isabella, who brought a red silk dress. It was beautiful, entirely embroidered with gold threads, with long sleeves and a neckline that was daring without being vulgar. It must have cost more money than Marina would ever see in her entire life. The problem is it's a bit loose here on the chest, Lady Helen pointed. It needs to be tighter. You understand? Marina took the dress, examining the stitching. It was master craftsmanship, every stitch perfectly aligned. Any alteration there would require unstitching half the dress and redoing everything. My lady, this will be a lot of work, she said carefully. It will take all day, perhaps more. It's a good thing you're dedicated, Lady Isabella said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure you'll manage. Lady Clara approached, pretending to examine other embroideries on the table. It must be strange for you, isn't it? Living in a place like this? She picked up one of Marina's works, a delicate handkerchief with embroidered flowers. So different from the convent. It is different, Marina agreed, trying to keep her voice neutral. And the Lord. Lady Helen returned to the attack. He must seem a very important figure to a girl like you, almost intimidating, isn't he? There was something in the way she said girl that made Marina stiffen inside. He was very kind to me. Kind. Lady Helen repeated the word slowly. How interesting. He's not known for his kindness. The three women exchanged glances again. That look Marina was learning to recognize. The look of people conspiring. Anyway, Lady Helen tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder. I'm sure you'll take very good care of my dress. After all, that's what you're here for, isn't it? To serve. The word came out laden with double meaning, and Marina felt her face flush. But before she could respond, they were already leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and malice in the air. Marina stood alone with the red dress in her hands, knowing she had just fallen into a trap she barely understood. She worked all day on that cursed dress, unstitched, measured, sewed. Again. Her back ached, her eyes burned from concentration, and her hands began to be covered in pinpricks. When she finally finished, it was late at night. She went up to her room exhausted, washed her face in the basin of cold water, and collapsed into bed, still dressed. She slept heavily, dreamless. The next morning, when she went down to the sewing room, she found Lady Helen waiting. The dress was spread out on a table, and she held it in her hands with an expression of feigned sadness. Marina, dear, she sighed dramatically, I'm afraid there's been a small problem. Marina felt her stomach drop. Problem? The dress, well, it seems it's become too small. She showed the side of the dress, where the seam was stretched almost to breaking point. It no longer fits. It was a lie. Marina knew it was a lie. She had measured 3 times before sewing, and the dress was exactly the size Lady Helen had requested. But, my lady, I measured. Perhaps you made a mistake with the measurements? Lady Isabella suggested, feigning concern. Or perhaps you're not used to such fine fabrics. The problem is, Lady Helen continued, that now I have nothing to wear to tonight's dinner, and all because of, well, a measuring error. Marina looked at the dress, then at the 3 women. She knew she was being manipulated, deliberately humiliated, but she didn't know how to defend herself without appearing disrespectful. I can try to fix it. No, Lady Helen shook her head. You've caused enough problems already. I'll have to find something else at the last minute. She sighed again. I hope the Lord won't be disappointed with the quality of work being done here. It was a clear threat. Marina felt her blood run cold. Well, Lady Clara said, examining her painted nails, at least now we know what level of competence we can expect. They left, chuckling softly, taking the dress. Marina stood there, feeling small and humiliated. She knew she had done everything correctly, but she also knew that their word carried more weight than hers. She spent the morning trying to focus on other tasks, but couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Was this what Beatrice had meant about being a threat? Would the women invent problems to make her seem incompetent? At lunchtime, she decided to leave the sewing room and get some fresh air. The main courtyard was bustling, servants preparing decorations for the evening's dinner, knights coming and going, the normal movement of a castle. That's when she saw Lord Alexander crossing the courtyard on foot, talking to an older man she didn't know. Marina tried to hide behind a pillar, but he saw her. "Marina," he called, motioning for her to approach. She went. her heart pounding. The older man looked her up and down with curiosity. "This is Sir Bartholomew, my principal adviser," Lord Alexander said. "Bartholomew, this is Marina." The man nodded, politely. "The young woman from the convent. I've heard about you." Of course he had heard. Everyone in the castle knew her story. Marina curtsied. "Sir, are you enjoying life in the castle?" Bartholomew asked. "Yes, sir. Excellent. The Lord has a knack for choosing special people." There was something in the way he said it, a tone Marina couldn't decipher. Lord Alexander looked at him with a warning expression. "Bartholomew, we don't have time for talk. We need to review the preparations." Of course," the advisor smiled. "It was a pleasure, young lady." They walked away, but Marina saw Lord Alexander look back once before disappearing. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Marina tried to stay busy, but she knew that tonight's dinner would be a test. Lady Helen would certainly tell everyone about the error with the dress, and Marina would be marked as incompetent. As night fell, the castle transformed. Candles were lit in all the corridors, musicians appeared in the main hall, and the smell of elaborate food began to waft from the kitchens. Marina stayed in the sewing room, unsure whether to appear or hide. The decision was made for her when Beatrice appeared at the door. "Marina, put on the green dress. You will help serve dinner." "Me? But I don't know." "You'll learn. I need all the help I can get tonight." The housekeeper looked at her seriously. "And listen well. Stay quiet. Serve the food. Don't get involved in conversations. Understood?" Marina nodded, her stomach churning with nerves. She rushed up to her room, put on the green dress, tied her hair in a simple bun, and went down to the kitchen. The activity downstairs was a controlled chaos. Cooks rushing back and forth, dishes being prepared, trays being arranged. Beatrice put her to carry a tray with wine glasses. "Just don't drop them," was the only instruction. When she entered the main hall, Marina almost tripped over her own feet. The place was transformed. The long table was covered with a white linen tablecloth. There were flowers everywhere, and candles created a golden light that made everything shine like gold. The guests were already seated, middle-aged men in expensive clothes. Some women Marina didn't know, and there in the center of the table, Lord Alexander. He wore a black velvet doublet and had his hair tied back, which made his face more angular, more intimidating. Marina began serving the wine, trying to remain invisible. Everything was going well until she approached Lady Helen, who was wearing a blue dress Marina didn't recognize, probably one she already owned and was saving for the occasion. "Marina," she said loudly so the whole table could hear. "How are you, dear? Have you recovered from the incident this morning?" All eyes turned to Marina. She felt her face burn. "I'm fine, my lady." "That's good." Lady Helen smiled sweetly. "Sometimes it takes a while to get used to more refined tasks, doesn't it?" One of the guests chuckled softly. Marina wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. "What was the incident?" asked one of the women Marina didn't know. "Oh, nothing much." Lady Helen gestured with her hand, as if it were a trifle. "Just a small problem with a dress she was mending for me, but I'm sure with time she'll improve." Marina gripped the tray so tightly that her fingers turned white. She wanted to explain, to say it wasn't her fault, that it had been a trap. But she knew this was neither the place nor the time to defend herself. That's when Lord Alexander spoke, his voice cutting through the conversation like a sharp blade. "Interesting, Helen, because I saw the dress this morning before you gave it to Marina to mend, and it was exactly your size." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Lady Helen turned pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The other guests looked from one to another, not understanding the tension. Perhaps I was mistaken," Helen murmured. "Perhaps." His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath. "Marina, you may continue serving." Marina finished, serving the wine with trembling hands, trying to process what had just happened. Lord Alexander had defended her, in front of everyone. He had practically accused Lady Helen of lying. When she left the hall, she leaned against the corridor wall and took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The rest of the night passed without incident. Marina helped in the kitchen, washed dishes, avoided appearing in the hall again. When she finally went up to her room, she was physically and emotionally exhausted. She was changing clothes when she heard a soft knock at the door. She quickly put on her nightshirt and went to open it, expecting to find Beatrice. It was Lord Alexander. He was leaning against the doorframe, still in his dinner clothes, but more relaxed. His hair had come loose a bit from its tie, creating dark strands that fell across his forehead. "Marina." "My lord." Her voice came out in a whisper. He entered the room without asking permission, closing the door behind him. The small space became even smaller with his presence. "Helen lied about the dress," he said directly. Marina nodded, not knowing what to say. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" "It wasn't my place, my lord." He chuckled softly, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. "Your place." He approached, and Marina felt her back press against the wall. "And what do you think your place is, Marina?" The question caught her off guard. She looked at him, lost. I don't know." He raised his hand and touched her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Neither do I," he admitted softly. "Neither do I know what your place is here." His touch was gentle, but Marina felt as if she were on fire. No one had ever touched her that way, as if she were something precious. "But I know one thing," he continued, his voice even lower. "You will not be humiliated while you are under my protection. Understood?" Marina nodded, mesmerized by his dark eyes. For a moment they stood there, his hand on her face, she barely able to breathe. The entire world had narrowed to that small room, to those eyes, to that touch. Then he moved away, his hand falling to his side. "Good night, Marina." "Good night, my lord." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Marina remained leaning against the wall, her heart racing, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. Outside, the celebration continued, but there in the small room, Marina knew that something had changed forever. Marina awoke before dawn, her heart still pounding. She had dreamed of hands touching her face, of dark eyes that saw her as if they could read her soul. She rose and went to the small window, watching the courtyard still empty in the grey light of dawn. Everything had changed after the night before. She went down to the sewing room earlier than usual, trying to push away the confusing thoughts. Work always helped to clear her mind, but when she arrived there, she found a package on her work table. It was fabric, silk the color of red wine, soft as water, of a quality Marina had never seen up close. Alongside it, a note written in a firm, masculine hand, "To replace what was lost. A." Marina ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling its silky texture. That must have cost more money than she would earn in years of work. Was it a gift or an order? With Lord Alexander, she could never be sure. She decided to make a dress, not for her, that would be presuming too much, but she could use it as an example of her work, to show that she knew how to handle noble fabrics. She began to cut, measuring each piece carefully. It was a difficult silk to work with, slippery, requiring a steady hand and much patience. But Marina had both. She was so concentrated that she didn't hear the footsteps in the corridor. She only realized she wasn't alone when a shadow fell across the table. It was Lady Clara, the youngest of the three ladies. She was alone, which was rare. They always walked in a group like a pack. "Marina," she said, her voice softer than usual, "may I speak with you?" Marina looked up, suspicious. After what had happened the night before, any approach from the ladies seemed dangerous. "Of course, my lady." Lady Clara approached, nervously fidgeting with her hands. She was different from the other two, younger, less self-assured. She had curly brown hair and green eyes that now looked worried. I wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday, with Helen's dress." Marina stopped cutting, surprised. It was the last thing she expected to hear. "You don't need to apologize for anything, my lady." "I do." Clara looked at the door as if afraid of being overheard. "I knew she had lied about the measurements. I saw when she loosened the dress when trying it on, but I didn't say anything." Marina remained silent, processing the confession. Why are you telling me this? Clara sighed, sitting in a nearby chair. Because I saw how the Lord looked at you last night, and I've known Helen for years. She won't let it go. She looked directly at Marina. You're in danger and you don't even know it. A chill ran down Marina's spine. What kind of danger? Helen. She's not just a court lady. She's the widow of the Count of Stonehaven. She has influence, money, connections, and she's been obsessed with the Lord for years. Clara lowered her voice. She made other women disappear from the castle before. Women she considered rivals. But I'm no one's rival, Marina protested. I'm just an orphan who works here. Clara laughed, but it was a sad laugh. You really don't understand, do you? Marina, the Lord has never defended anyone in front of guests like he did yesterday. Never. Helen noticed that, and now you've become her primary target. Marina felt her stomach drop. She didn't want to be anyone's target. She just wanted to live in peace, do her work, go unnoticed. What should I do? Be careful, very careful. Clara stood up. And if you need help, I'm not like them. I don't always agree with Helen's methods. She left, leaving Marina alone with increasingly disturbed thoughts. She returned to working on the dress, but her hands trembled slightly. Every noise in the corridor made her look at the door. Every shadow that passed by the window made her nervous. The day passed slowly. Marina ate lunch in the kitchen with the other workers, listening to gossip about the previous night's party. Apparently, Lady Helen had left early, claiming a headache. Lady Isabella had also disappeared shortly after the incident with the dress. I've never seen the Lord contradict a lady in front of everyone like that, one of the cooks commented. Helen turned the color of a bell pepper. Serves her right, grumbled another. That woman thinks she owns the castle. Marina said nothing, but noticed that some looked at her with renewed curiosity. The story was already circulating through the castle. Soon everyone would know that the Lord had defended the orphan against the noble lady. At dinner time, she decided to eat in her room. She didn't want to risk another confrontation. Beatrice brought a plate of meat and vegetables along with a warning look. Is everything all right up there? The housekeeper asked. It is. Why? Because a lot of people are talking about you today, and not everyone is saying good things. Marina sighed. It seemed that no matter what she did, she always ended up in the center of some trouble. Beatrice, may I ask you something? You may. Why did the Lord bring me here? Truly? The housekeeper remained silent for a while, as if deciding how much she could tell. You resemble someone, she finally said. Who? His wife, the one who died 3 years ago. Marina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. He was married for 2 years. Her name was Lydia. She was a sweet, gentle girl, very much like you. The physical face, the quiet way of speaking, the kindness in her eyes. Beatrice sighed. She died of a fever. The Lord, well, he was never the same after that. Everything began to make sense. The strange way he looked at her, as if seeing a ghost, the unexpected protection, the sudden interest in an unimportant orphan. He brought me here because I remind him of her, Marina asked, her voice weaker than she intended. I don't know. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's another reason. Beatrice looked directly at her. But whatever the reason, you need to be careful. You're playing with fire, girl. After the housekeeper left, Marina sat on the bed trying to process everything. That's why the ladies hated her. Not only because she was an intrusive orphan, but because she reminded them of a woman who had had what they wanted, the Lord's love. But was it really love, or just a morbid obsession with the past? Night fell heavily over the castle. Marina tried to sleep, but couldn't. She lay awake listening to the night sounds, guards on patrol, wind rattling the windows, the heavy silence that only existed after midnight. That's when she heard a knock at the door. She rose slowly, her heart already beating faster. It could be Beatrice or one of the other workers, but deep down she knew it wasn't. She opened the door and found Lord Alexander. He was without a coat, only in his white shirt and dark trousers. His hair was disheveled as if he had run his hands through it many times. "Marina." His voice was different, hoarser, laden with something she couldn't identify. "My lord." He entered the room without asking permission, as he had the other time. But this time there was an urgency in him, a tension that charged the air. "Did you receive the fabric?" "I did. Thank you, my lord. It's beautiful." He nodded, but didn't seem to be truly listening. He walked to the window, looked out, then returned to stand near her. "Marina," he began, then stopped as if he didn't know how to continue. "My lord." He turned to her, and Marina saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Vulnerability, as if the defenses he always maintained had crumbled for a moment. "Do you know why I brought you here?" The question caught her off guard. She could lie, pretend she knew nothing, but something in his expression made her choose the truth. "Beatrice told me that I remind you of your wife." He closed his eyes as if the words had physically hurt him. "Lydia." The name came out in a harsh whisper. "Yes, you remind me of her. At first I thought that was all it was, a cruel twist of fate." He approached, and Marina felt her back touch the wall again. "But it's not just that," he continued. You are also different from her, stronger, more alive." His hand rose to touch her face as it had the night before. But this time it didn't stop there. His fingers traced down her neck, brushed her collarbone, leaving a trail of fire on her skin. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured, but he didn't pull away. "Why are you?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Instead of answering, he leaned in and rested his forehead against hers. Marina felt his warm breath on her face, smelled the scent that was already etched in her memory, leather and pine and something entirely masculine. "Because you make me feel things I thought I had buried with her," he confessed. "And that terrifies me." Marina's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could feel it. She was between the wall and his body, enveloped by his warmth and the overwhelming presence he carried. "Marina," he said her name like a prayer. "Do you understand what's happening here?" She shook her head, honest. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I know it's dangerous. For you, for me, for everyone in this castle." He stepped back, but didn't remove his hands from her face. "If you wanted to leave, I would understand. I would provide a dowry, a position somewhere safe." "I don't want to leave." The words came out before Marina could think. His eyes widened slightly. "Why?" That was the million-dollar question. Why would a poor orphan want to stay in a castle full of intrigues, targeted by powerful women living in a situation she didn't understand? "Because," she hesitated, then decided on the truth again. "Because I've never felt so alive as I do here. With you." It was as if she had lit a fire inside him. His hands pressed her face harder, his eyes darkened, and for a moment Marina was sure he was going to kiss her. But he controlled himself at the last second, releasing her and stepping back. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." "Marina." He ran his hands through his hair, clearly in internal conflict. "I could destroy you, my life, my past, the responsibilities I carry, but all of this is greater than you imagine." "Then explain it to me," she said, stepping away from the wall and taking a step towards him. "Tell me about Lydia. Tell me about why everyone is afraid of you. Tell me the truth." He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing options she couldn't see. "The truth," he repeated slowly. "The truth is that Lydia did not die of a fever. She was murdered, and I never found out who did it." The room fell into absolute silence. Marina felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "Murdered, poisoned, in our own bed in the middle of the night." His voice was hard as stone, "And ever since, I've been searching for the killer. Everyone who comes to this castle, every alliance I make, every person I trust, it's all part of that search." Marina swallowed hard. "And me? Why did you bring me here?" He looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Because the person I saw you with at the convent, it wasn't the first time I'd seen you. What do you mean? I knew you before, Marina. A long time ago, and I have reason to believe that you may be the key to finding out who killed my wife. Marina's world collapsed for the second time in a few days. Everything she believed about herself, about her history, about why she was there, had just turned to smoke. And who am I? She whispered, but Lord Alexander was already heading for the door. That's the question I intend to answer, he said before leaving. And when you know, you'll understand why your life is in danger here, and why, even knowing that, I cannot let you go. The door closed, leaving Marina alone with a secret that changed everything. Marina didn't sleep a wink after Lord Alexander left. She sat on the bed until dawn, trying to piece together a puzzle that made no sense. She, an orphan abandoned at the gates of a convent, had some connection to the murder of his wife. It was impossible, but he was not a man to invent stories. When she went down to the sewing room, her hands trembled so much she could barely hold the needle. She tried to concentrate on the wine-colored silk dress, but every stitch seemed wrong, every movement forced. It was Beatrice who found her there, around noon, with silent tears streaming down her face. "Child, what happened?" Marina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "Nothing, I'm fine." "Like hell you are." The housekeeper sat in a chair beside her. "The Lord was here last night?" Marina nodded, unable to lie. "And did he say something that upset you so?" "Beatrice," Marina dropped the embroidery. "Do you know anything about my life before the convent?" The question caught the older woman by surprise. "What do you mean?" "The Lord said he knew me before, that I might have a connection to what happened to his wife." Beatrice remained silent for a long time, her face cycling through several different expressions, surprise, recognition, and something that looked like fear. "Beatrice." "Marina, do you remember anything from before you were 5 years old?" The question was like a punch to the gut. "Why 5 years old? I thought I was abandoned as a baby." "That's what the sisters told you. But," Beatrice sighed heavily, "child, I was here when the Lord's wife died. And in the week following the burial, he disappeared for 3 days. When he returned, he was different, more somber, more obsessed." Marina felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that have to do with me?" "Because it was around the same time that a child disappeared from one of the nearby villages. A girl about 5 years old, brown hair, large eyes." Beatrice looked directly at her. "People commented that the Lord had been asking questions about her." The world began to spin around Marina. She held onto the table to keep from falling. "Are you saying he kidnapped me?" "I don't know, no one knows, but there have always been rumors." Beatrice stood up, pacing nervously around the room. "Marina, you need to ask yourself a question. Why would a 5-year-old child be taken to a distant convent instead of being raised in a nearby village? Why did no local family adopt her?" Memories began to surface like flashes, fragments of images Marina had always thought were dreams. A small house, a woman humming, the smell of baking bread, and fear. So much fear. "I remember something," she whispered. "I always thought they were nightmares, someone screaming, many people running, a house on fire." Beatrice approached quickly. "What else?" "A woman. I think it was my mother, hiding me in a closet, telling me to stay very still, that I couldn't make a sound." Tears began to stream down again, and then nothing. "I only remember waking up in the convent." "Jesus Christ," Beatrice murmured. "Marina, I think you're not just any orphan. I think you are the daughter of the woman who killed Lydia." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" "Think about it. Why did the Lord bring you here after all these years? Why didn't he leave you in peace at the convent?" Beatrice gripped her shoulders. "He's using you as bait, to lure out whoever killed his wife." Marina felt as if she had been stabbed in the chest. Everything made sense in a horrible way. The unexpected protection, the sudden interest, the nights. He appeared in her room. It wasn't for her. It was for what she represented. "He's using me," she said, more to herself than to Beatrice. "And you are in mortal danger, girl. If he's right, and you really are the daughter of the one who killed Lydia." Beatrice didn't finish the sentence. Marina stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "I need to get out of here." "You can't. He'll never let you. You're too important to his plans." "Then I'll confront him. Demand the full truth." "Marina, don't do that. You don't know the Lord. When he's focused on something, he can be dangerous." But Marina was already decided. She ran up to her room, put on the best dress she had, the green one, tied her hair back, and headed towards the Lord's chambers. She had never been there before. The main rooms were in the tower, 2 floors above the guest quarters. She ascended the stone stairs, her heart pounding, ignoring the surprised looks of the guards. She knocked on the heavy, dark wooden door. "Enter." His voice came from within, calm as ever. Marina opened the door and stepped inside. The chamber was enormous, almost the size of the main hall. There was a gigantic bed with black velvet curtains, a fireplace lit even in the daytime heat, shelves full of books, and a table covered with parchments. Lord Alexander was sitting behind the table, writing something. When he saw her, he looked up in surprise. "Marina, I wasn't expecting you." "We need to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. He laid down his quill, leaned back in his chair, and studied her. Marina noticed he had changed clothes. He wore a dark leather doublet over a white shirt and his hair was tied back. He looked more official, less vulnerable than the night before. "About what?" "About who I really am. About why you brought me here. About the full truth." Marina took a deep breath. "And about what you intend to do with me." A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Have you discovered something new?" "I discovered that I'm probably not an orphan, that you knew me when I was a child, and that you are using me as bait to lure out your wife's killer." He didn't deny anything. He just sat there looking at her with that indecipherable expression. "And how do you feel knowing that?" The coldness in his voice was like a slap in the face. Marina felt anger surge in her chest, an anger she didn't even know she had. "How do I feel?" she repeated, her voice rising a tone. "I feel betrayed, used, manipulated. I thought that—" She stopped, realizing she was about to say something she shouldn't. "You thought what?" "Nothing." "Marina." He stood up, walking around the table. "Finish the sentence." "I thought you cared about me." The words burst out. "I thought there was something real between us, but I'm just a pawn in your game of revenge." He stopped in front of her, so close that Marina could see the fine lines around his eyes. "You're right," he said simply. The confirmation hurt more than any denial. Marina felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. "Then let me leave." "No." "Why?" "Because it works." He took a step forward, forcing her to retreat. "Your presence here is already yielding results. People are moving, making contacts they haven't made in years. Whoever killed Lydia is nervous." "How do you know?" Instead of answering, he went to the table and picked up a paper. "I received this morning." It was a letter, written in an elegant feminine hand. Marina read it quickly and felt her blood run cold. "My lord, I request a private audience to discuss matters of mutual interest. There are certain pieces of information about the past that it might be prudent to discuss before they become public knowledge. Respectfully, Helen of Stonehaven." "She knows something," Marina whispered. "I suspect so. And tonight I will." "Find out what?" He took the letter back. "That's why you cannot leave here. We are close to discovering the truth." Marina stared at him, trying to see if there was any trace of the man who had touched her face with such tenderness on previous nights. But she only found cold determination. "And then? When you find out who killed your wife, what happens to me? Then you will be able to choose, to stay or to leave, but with the full truth about who you are." "And what if I choose to leave now?" His eyes hardened. "You cannot. Will you stop me?" "If necessary." It was a clear threat. Marina realized she was seeing the true Lord Alexander, not the vulnerable man who appeared in her room at night, but the Lord of Lands who ruled with an iron fist. "I understand," she said calmly. "I am your prisoner." You are my protection, he corrected. And my responsibility. Your responsibility? Marina laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. Or your revenge? He didn't answer, but something in his face changed, as if she had hit a nerve. Marina turned to leave, but stopped at the door. There's one thing you haven't considered, she said without turning around. What? What if I'm innocent? And what if my mother, if she truly existed, is innocent too? And what if you are destroying the lives of innocent people because of an obsession? This time the silence lasted longer. I will discover that too, he said finally. Marina left the chamber with the feeling that she had just lost something very important. She didn't quite know what. Perhaps the illusion that someone truly cared about her. Perhaps the hope that she could have a different life from the one she had always known. She descended the stairs slowly, trying to decide what to do next. She couldn't flee. He had made it clear he wouldn't allow it. She couldn't confront Helen alone. The woman was powerful and dangerous, and she could no longer trust the only man who had made her heart beat faster. She was alone in a castle full of enemies, being used as bait in a hunt she didn't even fully understand. When she reached the ground floor, she found Clara waiting in the corridor. The young lady seemed agitated, looking nervously from side to side. Marina, thank goodness, she approached quickly. I need to speak with you. It's urgent. What is it? Helen, she's not just planning to talk to the Lord tonight. Clara lowered her voice to a whisper. I overheard her talking to Isabella. They have something planned, something that will definitively resolve the Marina problem. The chill Marina felt this time was different. It was the chill of true fear. What do you think they'll do? I don't know, but Helen brought something hidden in her room, something she keeps locked in a small box, and this morning I saw her talking to one of the knights, that bald one, Matthew. Marina remembered the knight who had looked at her with hostility since the first day. Do you think they'll try to harm me? I'm sure of it. Clara grabbed her arm. Marina, you need to get out of here, tonight, before Helen's meeting with the Lord. He won't let me leave. Then don't let him know. Clara looked around once more. There's a secret passage in the east wing. It was used for smuggling in old times. It leads directly into the forest. If you leave after midnight when the guards change shifts, you might be able to escape. Marina hesitated. Fleeing would be admitting defeat. It would be leaving all questions unanswered. But staying could mean death. Why are you helping me? She asked. Clara sighed. Because I've seen what Helen is capable of, and because I think you deserve a chance to choose your own destiny. Before Marina could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Clara quickly stepped away, whispering, East wing, third door on the right, midnight, think about what I said. She disappeared around a bend in the corridor, leaving Marina alone with an impossible decision: run and never discover the truth about herself, or stay and risk never leaving that castle alive. The sun was setting, staining the stone walls with a reddish light that seemed to announce a storm. And Marina knew that whatever her choice, that would be the night when everything would be resolved. For better or for worse. Marina spent the next few hours in a state of tension that gnawed at her from within like a slow fire. She tried to work, tried to eat, tried to feign normality, but every shadow that passed by the window made her jump. The entire castle seemed to carry a strange electricity, as if even the stones knew that something important was about to happen. When night truly fell, she decided not to flee. She couldn't live the rest of her life wondering who she was, where she came from, what crimes her family supposedly committed. If she was going to die that night, at least she would die knowing the truth. She put on the wine-colored silk dress she had made from Alexander's fabric. If she was going to face her destiny, she would do so, wearing the only beautiful thing she had ever owned. She let her hair down, letting it fall loosely over her shoulders, and descended to the main hall. She wanted to hear the conversation between Helen and the Lord. She wanted to understand once and for all what game was being played with her life. The castle was quieter than usual. Most of the servants had retired, and only a few guards patrolled the corridors. Marina moved like a shadow, using the secondary passages she had learned in recent weeks. She reached the main hall and hid behind one of the columns from where she could see and hear without being seen. Helen was already there, sitting in a chair near the fireplace. She wore a black dress that made her look like a professional widow, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. In her hands, a small dark wooden box. Lord Alexander entered a few minutes later, and his presence completely changed the atmosphere of the hall. He seemed larger, more dangerous, like a predator who had finally found the prey he had hunted for years. "Helen," he said, sitting in the chair opposite her, "you have information about the past that you deem important." "I do." Her voice was calm, but Marina noticed an almost imperceptible tremor. "Information about Lydia's death, and about the girl you brought to the castle. Continue." Helen opened the box she carried and took out a small vial filled with a clear liquid. "Do you recognize this?" Alexander's face hardened. "Where did you get that?" "It's the same poison that killed your wife." Helen held the vial up to the firelight. "And I know who administered it." Marina felt her heart stop for a moment. "Speak. First, I want guarantees, full pardon, protection, and the young orphan permanently removed from the castle. Are you bargaining for information about my wife's murder?" His voice dropped dangerously low. "I am protecting myself." Helen raised her chin. "Because I know things that could destroy very important people." Alexander stood up, walking to the fireplace. The light of the flames danced on his face, creating shadows that made him seem devilish. "Helen, I will ask a simple question, and I want a simple answer. Who killed Lydia?" "The mother of the girl you brought here. A peasant woman named Isabel, who had worked in the castle kitchens for years." The words tumbled out as if Helen was in a hurry to be rid of them. "She discovered that Lydia was pregnant and that you intended to legitimize the child. This would mean the child would be your direct heir, removing certain opportunities from others." Marina felt as if she had been stabbed in the chest. Her mother had killed the Lord's pregnant wife. "Continue," Alexander said, his voice too controlled. "Isabel had a small daughter. When you discovered the truth, you sent men after her. There was conflict. The house caught fire. Isabel died." Helen paused. "But the child survived. And how do you know this?" Helen hesitated, and that's when Marina realized something was wrong. Very wrong. Because I was there." The silence that followed was sepulchral. "You were there," Alexander repeated slowly. I had gone to speak with Isabel, to try to convince her to confess the crime." "A lie." His voice cut through the air like a whip. "You went there to make sure she was dead, because you didn't want witnesses." Helen turned pale. "What are you talking about?" Alexander turned to her, and Marina saw on his face an expression she had never seen before. It was pure fury, controlled by years of iron discipline. "I know who killed Lydia, Helen. I always knew. I was just waiting for you to reveal yourself." The vial fell from Helen's hands, shattering on the stone floor. The liquid spread, fuming slightly. "Isabel never killed anyone." Alexander approached her slowly. "Isabel discovered that you were slowly poisoning my wife, feigning treatment for a non-existent illness. And when she tried to warn me—" "No," Helen stood up abruptly. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You killed Isabel and set fire to her house to hide the evidence. And then you pretended her daughter had died too." Marina emerged from behind the pillar, unable to restrain herself any longer. "But I didn't die," she said, her voice echoing in the silent hall. Both turned to her. Helen turned the color of wet paper. "Marina," Alexander said, but she cut him off. "My mother didn't kill anyone." She approached Helen, who recoiled towards the wall. "She died trying to protect his wife. And you killed them both." "The bastard is lying," Helen shrieked. "She's the daughter of a murderer, a—" She stopped, realizing she had completely given herself away. "A witness," Alexander completed. "The only living person who saw you leave Isabel's house that night." Marina remembered now. Everything came back at once. Helen's face illuminated by the flames of the house, her elegant dress contrasting with the scene of destruction, the terror of seeing her mother slump to the ground. "You wore a gold brooch," she said, her voice trembling with anger, "in the shape of a rose. I remember thinking how beautiful it was, even in the midst of all that carnage." Helen instinctively touched her chest, where an identical brooch was pinned to her dress. "That proves nothing," she said, but her voice was weak. "It proves enough," Alexander said, "added to the fact that you just confessed to having been there, to knowing details that only the killer would know, and to bringing the very poison that killed my wife." Helen looked desperately towards the door, but Matthew appeared there, blocking the exit. Marina realized that the knight was not there to help Helen. He was following Alexander's orders. "Why?" Marina asked, genuinely curious. "Why did you do all this?" Helen laughed, but it was a hysterical, broken laugh. "Because I loved him for years, even before he married that insipid girl." Tears began to stream down her face. "I was perfect for him, noble, educated, wealthy, but he chose a pretty peasant instead of me." "So you killed her," Alexander said, more a statement than a question. "It wasn't planned," Helen sobbed. I just wanted her to be sick for a few days, for you to see how weak, how unsuitable she was. But she didn't react as she should have. The poison was too strong." Marina felt nauseous. The woman had killed out of jealousy and a morbid obsession. "And my mother found out," she said. "Your mother was a busybody. She kept asking questions, investigating. I tried to convince her to keep quiet, but she said she would tell the Lord everything." Helen turned to Alexander. "It wasn't my fault. If she had stayed quiet, you would never have been discovered." Alexander was cold as ice. "And Marina would have grown up with her mother instead of in a life of lies." The hall fell silent. For a moment, Marina looked at Helen, the powerful woman who had tried to humiliate her, who had planned to kill her, and felt something unexpected. It wasn't anger. It was pity. "You destroyed 3 lives for an obsession that was never reciprocated," she said softly. "Lydia died, my mother died. And you have lived all these years carrying this guilt." "I feel no guilt," Helen shrieked. "I feel rage at both of you for taking what was rightfully mine." Alexander took a step towards her, and his presence became truly threatening. "Matthew," he said without taking his eyes off Helen, "take the lady to the cells. Tomorrow she will be publicly judged for murder." As Matthew approached to escort her, Helen made one last desperate attempt. She pulled a small dagger from inside her dress and lunged towards Marina. But Alexander was faster. He intercepted the blow, disarming Helen in a fluid motion. The dagger flew through the air, hitting the wall with a metallic clang. "Enough," he said, his voice imbued with an authority that brooked no questioning. "Take her." Matthew dragged Helen out of the hall, and her screams echoed through the corridors until they disappeared completely. Marina stood there, trying to process everything that had just happened, the truth about her family, about her history, about why she was in the castle. Everything had been revealed in a matter of minutes. Alexander approached slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that might flee at any moment. "Marina," he began. "You knew," she said. "From the beginning you knew Helen was the culprit." "I suspected. I wasn't certain." He stopped a step away from her. "That's why I brought you here. I knew your presence would make her act, make a mistake. You used me as bait." "I did." He didn't try to deny or justify, "and it almost cost you your life." Marina looked into his eyes, searching for signs of the man who had touched her face with such tenderness. He was there, hidden behind years of pain and obsession with justice. "And now," she asked, "now that you've found the truth, what happens to me? Now you choose." He extended his hand to her. "You can leave with enough money to start a new life anywhere. Or you can stay. Stay as what? Your servant? Your living memory? Of your dead wife?" "Stay as the woman who made me live again," he said simply. "As someone who deserves to be loved for who she is, not for what she represents." Marina looked at his extended hand, then at his face. She saw sincerity there, and something more. Hope. The hope of a man who had spent 3 years living only for revenge, and now discovered that he could still feel other things. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You won't look at me and see her?" "I will look at you and see the woman who had the courage to confront me when she discovered the truth. The woman who chose to stay and face danger instead of fleeing. The woman who made me remember that there is life beyond death." Marina put her hand in his, feeling the warmth, the strength, the promise of something new beginning. "Then I stay," she said. He pulled her close, enveloping her in his arms. This time, when they leaned into each other, there was nothing stopping them. The kiss was gentle at first, hesitant, as if they were both rediscovering how to live. Then it deepened, laden with all the fear, all the tension, all the passion they had kept for weeks. When they separated, Marina rested her forehead against his, finally feeling at home. "Alexander," she whispered his name for the first time. "Marina," he replied, and there was infinite tenderness in the way he said it. Outside, the wind swept through the castle walls, carrying away the last vestiges of a tragedy that had begun years ago. And there in the hall, illuminated only by the fire in the hearth, two people who had lost everything discovered that they could still rebuild something new, something true, something worth living for. Fate had thrown Marina into the arms of the wrong man that first night, but time and truth had proven that sometimes the mistakes of fate are, in fact, the only possible right choices.